Hi, and welcome to another coffee break with Formation. So today, I have a very practical tip for people who are prepping for that typical coding interview at a FANG level company. It is one of those tips that I sometimes roll my own eyes at because it feels like one of those practical interview specific skills that doesn't have all that much to do with becoming a better engineer. And if you know anything about me or Formation, then you know that we're all about becoming a stronger engineer. So I guess the one thing I will say to that is that, engineers really love to optimize everything. Reducing a 3-second task to a 1-second task can be just absolutely delightful to an engineer. So I will just get straight to my tip. So one of the recent changes that has happened in our industry is that interviews, well, not just in our industry, but interviews are moving, largely online. And when we're online, we typically don't have a whiteboard to draw things out and draw examples. So I see so many engineers in interviews just stumbling over the very basic skill of walking through an example. So I am going to actually screen share to show you. Okay, so we're working on this problem where we're finding the middle node of a linked list in one pass. So I guess let's say we have this linked list like this. First of all, tip number one is I recommend to always put your examples or non-compilable code in a comment if you are in a compiled environment. It's one of those things where if you don't do that, I guess it might just bother the engineer and they're constantly just being like, I want to fix that red line. So put it in a comment. Next is I wouldn't put these little arrows in between. This is really, really practical. And simply the reason for that is that it just takes too much time to create them. I want to be able to create an example and walk through it very quickly. So it's just not worth the time to me. If you want to, you can kind of point out loud that you're separating your nodes in your linked list by space. Now, a very common task that you have to do with linked list or arrays is you often have to iterate through them. And a lot of times I'll see people just talking about the iteration kind of verbally, but it's very hard to hold the state of a program in your head. So what I recommend is, let's say we have a variable and let's call it cur. And we can make it one letter, let's say C, and we can put it right below the node that we are currently on. And you can visually show while you're walking through your code, iterating through it by putting spaces before it. And another thing that I'll see often is that you might need to iterate through it with 2 pointers, right? Like you might have an I and a J, or you might have a cur and a previous. In this example, the solution to this is often using a technique called using slow and fast pointers. So you may have S and F. Right. And what I will see is a lot of times people will just do it like this, and they'll, if they move forward S, they now have to move back, F. And I just kind of see people stumbling over iterating through their examples. So what I recommend is very simple, is put these variables on separate lines like this. And now when you move S, F can also move independently, and it's just much more easy to walk through an example. So I know this is probably a very oddly specific video. And these are 3 of like hundreds of oddly specific tips that I give to people during a lot of practice sessions that I run at Formation. But I guess to take a moment to zoom out, the one takeaway that I would have about this is to really just constantly be optimizing. Don't just focus on solving really, really hard problems. You should be practicing so many other skills when it comes to interviewing and engineering. And, you want to practice explaining your solutions. You want to practice walking through examples. You want to practice coming up with the best examples with which to walk through. And this list goes on and on and on. So, I guess my meta takeaway is to reflect after every single problem that you do and find just one tiny thing that you could do better and improve it. And if you're finding, faster and faster ways to do small things, these small, tiny improvements will compound over time and make both your practice as well as your actual interviews become more efficient over time. So that's it for today, and I will see you at the next coffee break with formation.